This,
It's mine too.
Oh,
God, yeah.
maybe we'll have to hand them out for the orientation.
Wait, did Commissioner Montano get one?
I did.
Okay.
Butterscotch makes me think of like.
Little old ladies and.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I can't say it.
Missy, are we off mute and starting a meeting right now?
We are off mute and you can start the meeting.
Okay. Okay, I'm calling the special meeting work session of the Port of Olympia Commission to order. It's Monday, June 9th, 2025 at around 5:34 p.m. We have an agenda today. I have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we will begin our discussion about the Port of Olympia Community Advisory Committee.
Right, just to tee up your discussion, commissioners. We talked about this a little bit at the last commission meeting, but as you may recall, the resolution that governs the POCAC indicates that the commission will give the POCAC written tasks that it is to perform, and it specifies within the resolution the specific work product that the commission would like to see from the POCAC. So this is on page 2 of the resolution. You can ask for a report or white paper, a policy recommendation, project recommendation, advice to executive director, assignment planning documents, supporting products. So again, though, it specifies very clearly that the Port Commission will assign tasks to the POCAC through a written request that includes the description of the scope of any assignment. So last year, when the POCAC increased from, I guess, up to 17 members, they all got together and did a big workshop, and in that came up with some operating rules and a document setting forth the expectations and roles of POCAC and POCAC members. Those, unfortunately, when they were drafted, conflicted with the resolution because the expectations and roles document in particular said that it was the POCAC would come up with work plans and they would propose those to the commission. And I think it also had some in the operating rules, some things that added unnecessary complications for the POCAC and how it operated. It specified that they were to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act, even though they're not a body that really is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, and that creates a lot of extra procedural steps and things. So I've talked with the POCAC, worked with the POCAC, and I pared down. I basically combined the 2 documents that existed before. There was an exhibit A that was roles and expectations and an exhibit B that was operating. I rolled it all down into primarily operating rules and run it by the POCAC. And it's now consistent with the resolution, or the way it's drafted is consistent with the resolution that the commission is the one that assigns tasks to the POCAC. And what I was hoping to discuss with the commission today is how you all want to work with the POCAC. We have a joint meeting with them, with commissioners who are available that night, and the POCAC on June 17th to talk through how they and you will work together. There was a request at the last commission meeting that you all have an opportunity to discuss this before the joint meeting with the POCAC. And primarily one of the challenges we've had in the past is how the commission develops tasks for the POCAC and how it communicates those to the POCAC. I leave it to the commission to discuss.
Chair, can I, since that was my request, may I say something?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason I requested that we talk about this as a commission is because I feel like we have dedicated citizens who are participating in the POCAC and trying to provide guidance to the Port of Olympia. And I think Commissioner Ayala and I started in 2021, is that right? And ever since we've been, so I went back and pulled the resolutions from every year because I was trying to refresh my memory. So it was 2022 when we went to 17 POCAC members. And I don't think we've been providing clear direction, or we haven't connected the dots with the POCAC of expectations. And I feel like that's created frustration for those people, those citizens who are dedicating their time to volunteer on the POCAC. And so I really wanted us to have the opportunity to come in with a clear plan for them so that we can provide them with clear direction in our joint meeting. We did not publish videos of POCAC meetings. So I tried to go back and get the actual words that were said in our previous joint meeting, and it doesn't exist because we don't publish those videos. I also tried to go back to the commission. So that was on June 25th, 2024. And then May 26th, 2022 was when we had a work session. But there isn't a video. I spoke with executive director. This was when we had some staff transition, and there's not a video of that meeting either. So I'm trying not to just use my memory, which is spotty on this, but it is, and I might lean on you, Commissioner Ayala. I believe that at our joint meeting with the POCAC, I believe that this commission, whether it was before this commission or after, or the three or five, said that we voted to give the POCAC the direction to be the implementation team for Vision 2050. Do you recall that, Commissioner Ayala? Okay, so I tried to find it in our resolutions, and I tried to find it, and it's probably there, and I just couldn't find it. But so it was my understanding that that was the first request of the POCAC, was rather than coming up with these white papers, and there was real concern about overlap with staff and consultants and not wasting the time of the POCAC on projects where we weren't able to execute. Our request was going to be that they were the implementation team, which is required by Vision 2050, which the way it was worded included some members of the POCAC, but other people as well. And what we voted on was saying, nope, POCAC, you're going to be the implementation team. This is a great opportunity for, this was before, I can't find when. So whether we want this to stick or not, I think that what the commission communicated to POCAC, the POCAC is now working on other things. And so there was a communication breakdown. And I think that, as the executive director Smith said, like with our direct resolution conflicting with their own chart, like how do we clarify? So for me, my goal is that we leave this meeting with clear direction so that the POCAC knows what we want, so that they're not left in purgatory just wondering. I personally see the Citizens Advisory Committee as a great opportunity to be a sounding board for public feedback on things, not as something that contradicts staff or consultant work, which is something the June 25th, 2024 meeting, we specifically discussed this, that we need to make sure that we respect the work of our staff and consultants. That's it, as my little blah, 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 blah. But I think that I want to hear more from the commission as a whole as to, is any of that ringing a bell? Are we on the same page with that? Are we starting over on all of that? What are your thoughts as to, because I feel like it's muddled, and no one's fault. We've had massive staff turnover. The people that have been in charge of managing the POCAC have moved on. We've had POCAC members move on there. So this isn't anyone's fault, but I really feel like we're doing a disservice to the citizens that volunteer. Sorry, community members, Commissioner Basavada. Community members that I just. And I think maybe that's something we can talk about, whether we can talk about that at our joint meeting, whether citizen is a word that is in alignment with our values or not. Commissioner Basavada has brought that up. Community is fine with me. Yeah. So what do you guys think based on the history?
Mr. Montana?
So I do remember discussing the implementation team at our retreat earlier in the year. I think we had mentioned that this was something we wanted to move forward with the POCAC, and I think it would be a great idea to help implement Vision 2050 based on, I can't remember his name, but the guy who helped intercity transit.
Yeah, Jason.
Jason, and he mentioned that they went out and did all those community surveys and community engagement, and if the POCAC is able and willing, why not use them for that? They are in the community.
What is your, is that news to you, or is that?
Yeah, we didn't, I don't remember talking about that at about using the POCAC. We had that retreat that was at SPSCC's Lacey campus. I don't remember talking about
one-on-one
POCAC at that. The only thing I would say is, if you want to go, I think that when you're doing your, the implementation team for Vision 2050, I would make sure that on that team that you've got, I don't know if the POCAC has a representation from all of the sort of sectors or
Yeah.
stakeholders that you would want. So like if I was building something, if I was building a team, an implementation team from scratch, if you will, I would want just a couple of at-large community members, which I think is what your POCAC is. There's a couple that I would probably, there's a couple of places that I would say, I may want some specific expertise in that specific place. Like, it may be, some specificity on somebody from the Economic Development Council or somebody like, so.
Environmental community.
Yeah, so like you may, I don't know, I know of the POCAC as they're all community members. They're there as community members, not necessarily as stakeholders to a specific
Mhm.
thing. So, but I mean, maybe you could,
Well, and
Or in your-
that's probably why it was originally structured with the POCAC being I think it was two of the members of the implementation team. So maybe that makes more, we're not doing it now. So we can, whether or not we voted on it or not, we can find out, but it doesn't, I get what you're saying.
I would just say this, I would love to have a traditional, as it's contemplated in the plan, a Vision 2050 implementation team. It is, and if it's part of the POCAC, then that's fine. I would also say then maybe in your recruitment for the vacancies, maybe there's some targeted recruitment that's occurring there as well. You may specifically want to go find someone specifically from the finance community, someone specific, like from institute, somebody specifically from with workforce background, specifically someone from economic development. Like you may look, instead of just districts, you may look for subject matter expertise if you want to use them in things that require stakeholder awareness, subject matter.
I think that's too heavy of a lift at this point. Like, I think that's aspirational and we could potentially do that in the future. But I think using two members from the POCAC like it's contemplated in the plan is probably the easiest way to.
I'm listening.
Just in Vision 2050, it says on the implementation team, it will include two members of the POCAC. I think that's a very clear, when we have the conversation with the POCAC, directive number 1, 2 of you will be involved in this implementation team that is going to do X and is going to be managed by whomever on the staff. If that is something that we have, I think because we committed to do it in Vision 2050, it's a priority to execute on it. So to me, that's just low hanging fruit of a task. This is a very clear task that we want you to do, POCAC.
Let's
anyone
continue
disagree?
Around and then
Okay,
we'll
yeah.
go, just let me give Commissioner Sanders an opportunity to address that or anything else.
To me, it's specifically written very clear that we assign tasks in writing, explaining what the description and scope of each assignment is and what type of product that we want from them. And so I'm not sure how it's happened in the past, but it's pretty clear to me how it's outlined in the resolution, how we go forward with assigning products and work to the committees.
Commissioner Sanders, actually, Alex, are we partly considering whether there are amendments we want to make to this resolution?
Well, I think we'll need to make amendments at a minimum, just eliminate the reference to an exhibit B. But I guess that's up to the commission, how you all want to work with the POCAC. I think we'd just love to have it be something that is functional for both you all and the POCAC and that can last for a while, because it feels like we've also come to you a number of times with this.
So Commissioner Sanders, are you invested in this method that's outlined in here? But but following whatever method is in the resolution.
Right, following whatever methods in it, but I agree with Commissioner Harding about, following it up with what we had in our work, product from prior about the two members, which outlines, a good path forward on how we look at, future assignments.
And can I ask another question? Is what's happened that we weren't giving them assignments in writing, and so in that vacancy, they created projects?
In the void.
Okay, so in the void, so we failed to provide something in writing, and so then there wasn't communication back that there was a request, it was more so that the POCAC just generated its own.
Yes, and
Scheduling meetings and.
yeah, I would say, well, not only is it assigning the task, but what did you want them to do with it? Like, that's what that's so we have a economic development subcommittee. Great committee, great minds on there, and I love being able to bring them together. But they don't know, like, what are we giving you? Like, what is and if you're following this resolution, we would have said, hey, here's a task. The various cities are updating the economy chapters in their comp plan. Your task is engage, read those, and provide us written white paper of response. That's a task. They're just a sitting committee.
Yeah.
Kind of looking for things to do that have an economic development narrative to them, which, for me, like somebody who works in this space, I love getting together with a group of people to just chit chat about economic development stuff. I don't know if it's actually yielding
Is it helpful? And
all the time.
And just two other pieces of background. One is, I think at the 17-member POCAC realized it was sort of an unmanageably large body, and that helped lead to the creation of the subcommittees with a more specific focus. And then what I think we've struggled with is sort of who comes up with the ideas for the tasks. Because even this allows for some possibility of the POCAC coming and saying, here's a list of things we're interested in. Commission, do you want us to work on them? If you do, give us a written assignment.
It was very clearly communicated in the June 25th, 2024 meeting that it was going to be disrespectful to have this, like, that the commission was going to be tasking the POCAC. That was very clearly communicated.
Okay.
And
So
it's not on video, so you're gonna have to take my word for it, but like, we talked about that.
that does mean the commission needs a mechanism.
Yes, which is what we
Something
didn't have.
to
Yeah.
allow it to come up with
Yes.
tasks and
And
assignments.
I don't blame them, like, they came up with something to do, cause we didn't do it, sorry.
And I don't know the skills and abilities
Right.
of each
Right.
resume and what they
Right.
bring to the table to even give them an assignment.
Right, that's a good point.
I mean, I don't know I don't know who their expertise currently sitting.
So there's a few different layers of conversation we've already struck on, and I could summarize them in a minute, but I want to give Commissioner Ayala, if you want to add a layer, and then I have some ideas for how we proceed.
Yeah, well, I think, part of the history timeline and, I think you were off by 1 year. 'Cause I
Okay.
think we started in 2022 and I think it was 2023, we approved to expand to 17 POCAC members. Not that that changes any, the outcome, but, I think the June meeting you were talking about, we have to remember at that time, we actually had a staff member who was an advisor to the POCAC committee and kind of took that role, took the commission's role actually away from the commission, and it became more of a staff member thing. So from speaking personally, I've just never had a real good understanding of how we should utilize an advisory committee that, there's clearly very capable people a part of that advisory committee, and I've always felt like we're just not really taking advantage of it. So I think if we can come together and devise that mechanism to where we can help direct the POCAC and their tasks, their projects, I think it's much better. because from my perspective, we should be focusing on our mission. And that's where that's where we should begin when we're thinking about projects that the POCAC can help us with. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Thank you. If I could build on that, I would say some of the questions I hear being raised are like, oh, did we fail in giving them assignments? And I think I think first of all, we shouldn't be beating ourselves up about that, because appropriately, we were focused on stabilizing a
Right.
director and staff,
Right.
and they had to come first. And so this is a really brilliant timing that you're bringing this conversation, because we're ready now in a way we weren't even 6 months ago to sort of think of this enrichment, this next piece of how we engage the Community Advisory Committee. So part of our question is what I heard from Commissioner Sanders, which I echo and have wanted to be able to like have them come to meetings or these work sessions that I'll miss next week. What is their competence? Like, what is their unique competence is both in the current formation and recruitment wise, when Commissioner Sanders works with the POCAC director to recruit new people, what competences are we looking for?
Well,
And that's where Mike was bringing up, like, is it stakeholder level or generalist, like, just help us under, like a poll, instead of doing a poll, understanding who people are. And I'll stop there. What were you gonna say?
well, Commissioner Ailes.
Well, I was just gonna say the POCAC, the members have been vetted. I mean, they've when they were appointed, I'm sure they submitted resumes and the selection committee understood their competencies, or, you know, and if they weren't competent, then they wouldn't have been selected for the committee,
Go ahead, sorry.
as I understand it. I've never been a part of the committee.
I was the vice,
Switching into.
vice chair when we went to this big expansion. And I don't think it was contemplated that we were curating a diverse group of stakeholders. It was contemplated that we were creating a community sounding board of volunteers. So the resumes were not reviewed as though we have this many finance people and this many environmental people and this many real estate people, because it aligns with our Vision 2050 and our strategic plan and our mission. It was like, these are people that want to be involved and give us access to community feedback, which is what we have been reflecting back, is more like the City of Olympia's One Community Work Group, where the task of the group was not to give their opinion, but to gather the opinions of the community to then condense back and bring to at that time, the city council of like, here's what we heard. The work product was, here's what we heard, not I have expertise in environmental science and I don't think you're doing the Bud Inlet project right. That's a question for us, but like, I think when it was created with 17, or how, did we get up to 17?
Did at one point.
So it was not through the lens of expertise to be a expert. It was, you are a community member that is willing to like support the efforts of this Port of Olympia, and how can we, and then we didn't, to your point, because we had other fires and priorities to put out, provide that guidance as to task.
I was just gonna, sorry.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I think, you know, we just had a joint meeting with the executive staff of the City of Olympia. And it was sort of interesting. They have like 14 various advisory committees they manage and staff. Each one of those advisory committees has a singular dedicated staff person. It is a portion of their job to manage and sort of curate the needs of that group. Also in selecting, they go through an interview process. People do submit and apply, and it goes through. Depending upon the advisory committee, oftentimes it is a little bit of a blend of, sometimes your expertise is simply just being a community member, because we're just looking for community insight. Whereas there's other times where, take the design review committee. They have a couple of seats that they are going to hold for somebody that has a legitimate professional background associated with architecture or engineering or whatever it may be. And they sort of do it. they blend it. I think it could be interesting to think about. There are specific things. I mean, we could look at the Vision 2050 and say, hey, there's a lot of things in here that are finance related or budget related. Maybe it would be worthwhile to have, you know, somebody with budget and finance background specifically, and we actually go target for those. I think it is a little tricky. I mean, first, you've got your first layer, we've got to fill, there's a desire to fill locations. We've got, because right now, we are not geographically diverse. Then you're trying to get just diversity from a class background, a race background, a gender background, a political identity background, and now we want to add a professional expertise component. It's tricky. I mean, I would say the more requirements that you're trying to look for, the harder it gets to fill. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but you've got to have some room. I think that, you know, when Alex and I had the conversation with the OCAC at that last meeting, they were wanting more specificity about how they can help.
Right.
Like it was, we want the commission to sort of give us, what is the task and in what form do you want the work to come in? So I think that makes a lot of sense on how to do that. So.
For me personally, this resolution helps me see that the vision that was stated here is not what I want. But that may not be true of everyone, you know, depending on what you want. For me, the idea that that if they get unsolicited public input, they forwarded it to the port's communication manager who determines how such unsolicited public input will be handled. Like, that's weird to me. I don't understand what we were doing there. To me, that we have to give a written request to for the description or scope of any assignment goes to the issue of like, how does it translate from an agenda planning, like then what the executive director gives the written request, I guess? It seemed to be all meant to control and stop like something possibly from happening. And I get that maybe we were in that world at one point.
It's very old.
For me, that,
So,
right,
like,
it's
the
been
language, it's just continued. Yeah.
Right. If I could just say two more things, for me, the number one thing I'd want as a product from them isn't listed here because it would be a work session topic, like pull together information about what's happening in other marinas, or your example, which was comprehensive plans, and do that for your monthly work session that the POCAC has, where we could choose, and then, yeah, have it televised so we can also see it if we weren't making it to their work session meeting. And for me, the last thing I wanted to flag here that tells me this is not what I want is that that then they specifically have the authority to solicit public involvement in the frequency and manner at their discretion, like seems the weirdest. The discretion is backwards in terms of when they have it and when they don't. Like that ought to be really well coordinated with us when they're actually doing any kind of community engagement outreach effort that's specific. Finally, the way the interviews are, I've heard Commissioner Sanders say like, well, it says we do it this way. Like if we are going to consider anything beyond what's listed here, probably it should be public about that. Like if we're going to consider other sorts of needs. And then there's just a weird language somewhere where it implies that we have to do one thing or the other. I can't remember where it was that we could only do one thing or the other. Where was it? There's something that makes it look like we, if someone's not attending often enough, like 30, then we either may fire them or accept their resignation, as opposed to like, I mean, do we really want to have something like that where our hands are tied, or recommend reasons why they should be excused? Like there's not the third option. So again and again, I do see this not as a Bible to be interpreted as much as something to be redone, which then brings up all those questions of what's our purpose for them.
I totally agree. I think this resolution, the fact that it goes so far back too, it just seems like legacy. Not at all what our current intent that we've communicated has been. And I agree with the examples that have been mentioned on ways that we could task the POCAC. I think those are much more useful, meaningful. Mike's example, Commissioner Vasavada's example, like. I think that having people write white papers, that's what this all started because they wrote all these white papers and we didn't do anything with them. Like, I mean, and there are some things that have happened because of the white papers, but people don't want to give you their opinion. They want you to use their opinion, right? So how do we give them tasks where we're actually gonna utilize what their work product is? I think those are better examples, like,
And something I found very valuable was I got a call, come to the Economic Development Subcommittee, and that's how I heard the work they were doing on the ferries. But that I hear
right,
has ruffled some feathers because it was something that kind of never, there wasn't the mechanism for that information of their conversation to come before the whole commission. And so there is, we need to sync it up.
and as we're looking at workload, I mean, maybe the executive director could say, hey, maybe this is a good task for the POCAC. And then the commission could say, that's a great idea, as we're telling you, we want you to do 400 things. You know, I think you'll be in the best position to, we can have the idea, but you can help us flesh out when that would be a good task for the POCAC.
I would agree since she's involved with everything,
Right.
but also a non-voting member, so she's kind of on both sides.
And then
Okay.
If that remains
in
you.
charge of the POCAC? Who's in, do we have staff?
I've been staffing the POCAC since.
So we probably need a staff person to support it.
Missy supports the POCAC.
I think I am the staff liaison to the Economic Development Committee and to the Destination Waterfront Committee. And then Sean is the staff liaison to the Bud Inlet.
And John.
And yeah.
Does that work? Having, or do we need a POCAC
I think
staff person?
I would first say that assigning the POCAC projects to do as a mechanism of reducing staff work isn't a real thing.
Yeah, no, not reducing yeah, more.
Like the idea
Yeah.
that, oh, we're swamped with so many things, just give it to the POCAC and that will reduce our
No,
work.
no.
That's not a real.
No, no, I don't disagree with you.
I think, if, I have seen the committees be able to, define a task. You know, and it could have, it should have come from the commission. In the absence of it coming from the commission, it got defined at the committee level. And I've seen them put together, I think, a good work product. And you'll see some of that when we have our joint meeting. The Destination Waterfront group has put together a PowerPoint and some recommendations on things. And I think that that's a viable, but they created that task. So I think it's possible. And the way that I work with them is to just, okay, here's when the next commission meeting is and how we can get it on there. And is there any additional content that you need? Were there studies that maybe you wanted to see? Can I track something down? And then I do try to guide them into what I think is where I think you guys might be. I would never want a POCAC subcommittee running down a path that I just know is gonna be a buzzsaw the minute that it gets to commission. I mean, so there is some interface there. We have talked, I feel like the POCAC is yours, not ours. And so there's a part of me, we're interfacing with them all the time. I don't see you as a body really much interfacing with them. And what I think might be more valuable, yes, have a staff support person. But I think just like we assign a commissioner to be at the EDC, I think that a commissioner should be assigned to the POCAC.
When we did committee assignments.
I like that. And I think it could rotate. I don't think it has to be a commissioner for the whole year. But there has to be knowledge that I'm responsible as the liaison to the commission.
They're yours.
So then when you come in to do your report, the
Right.
other business, whatever that, it's not other business, the commission reports. You would say, I met with the POCAC, they had their monthly meeting this week, here are the things they're working on here. We did add, Mike, right before you came, we asked for the POCAC, that's when Joel started giving us kind of these little briefings. But it's just a very different flavor, hearing just from the one person than, hearing and getting to see all the people connected. And if we can all rotate in and get that feeling, I think then it becomes our touch to the awareness to the community that right now it's almost that this has created barriers.
I think
that
it's a good first step to planning that mechanism for giving them work as well. If we're aware of what they're doing and attending regularly. Know who's on the POCAC and what their skill set are and what's going on at the port and be able to kind of define and mesh those two things together.
We have heard concerns about workload, the commissioners who are bearing a full-time job and everything along with all these committee assignments. And what we never got to the bottom of is, are we open to the 3 people volunteer to rotate through and one person's like, I'm out. I'm never gonna want to be there on a Tuesday.
I think
things like that we'd have to figure out.
Yeah, I think that I would wanna ask the POCAC if they would feel better about a dedicated person, or I just am worried that it will provide instability not having a person that's more consistent, but maybe I'm making that up. Maybe it's better to have diversity because then one commissioner doesn't filter it through their lens.
That's what.
Right, I can see it both ways.
I almost see it as like, it's maybe I'm going a little too far with the analogy, but it's almost like you have a House of Representatives, if you will, with your POCAC, if that's how you want to use them. They're representing the districts that you have here. You're intentional in building it with, and it is the vice president who presides over that body. And goes and participates and then
Mhm.
works to sort of bring it in. I mean, I could see that as a function of
Right.
one of your officers.
And the other piece is almost like a board of citizens who've chosen to be very engaged. And then when we have a town hall, the ask would be, help promote my town hall, can you each get 3 people? Like that kind of thing.
So going into when is it, next week or tomorrow?
It's next week.
Next week. What is it? So I'm hearing that we don't like the resolution. We don't feel like it accurately reflects. We have a commission meeting between now and then, right?
Yes.
But
It's
it's
another
probably
work
too
session.
quick of a turnaround to think we would have a new resolution
Yeah,
before
I mean,
that, so.
I'm happy to start from KEOWAC based on the feedback that I heard today. And share that out with the commission. But I feel like there's a lot in here and there's a lot that may want to change, and so there may be a lot of back and forth, and I doubt it's nailed down. Tuesday. In terms of your feedback.
Mike, could you clarify with me where it says the vice president oversees?
It doesn't say that.
I was gonna say, cause it doesn't.
I was using the analogy of the United States government.
And he's like, if it said that, I wouldn't know.
I'm like, selection of new members as vice
Yes.
president or designee. So I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
it is not in there. I'm saying, I was giving an example there.
So
Yeah,
what are we gonna go into this meeting? Like, it's clear that we want to provide the tasks in writing with a clear work product, yes? That is our shared. What?
Sorry,
You just
I was
called
looking over there.
me out. Wow. Like, we're all in agreement on that, right?
but the types of tasks sounds like it may have changed.
But, so we're agreed on that. And if we are not providing the POCAC with tasks, then we need to be informed that they need tasks. Not that they're gonna create them, right? Shared agreement around that.
Yes.
Like shared agreement that they're not gonna fill the vacuum with, that they're gonna be like, dudes, you need to give us some tasks.
But why do we have a
we
machine
have a
that
commissioner
like has to
going.
shake us to get
Yeah.
tasks? That almost doesn't sit well with me.
So if we have a commissioner going, to Commissioner Montana's point, we will know, like, so that will have more integration. We will know, right,
Are we doing tasks for tasks' sake? Are we doing tasks to keep them
I
happy?
think that's been a concern in the past, is there POCAC's ready and eager and the commission isn't quite sure what to give them, so they sort of, it feels like it's make work tasks. That's been, I know in the past that was.
and that's like ages of like, that's part of why we were trying to redo it, and it seems like we're in the same place we were when we started with the redo. A little bit.
I would just say I've personally been on various boards and groups like this without clear direction. It quickly just turns into a coffee club.
Well, or people
People are
leave.
just sort of brainstorming
Right.
ideas and they kind of just get into a spin. I do think that the idea of I'm not sure what the right vernacular is, but giving them some sort of thing to work on. Like, and it could be, hey, we just want you to convene people. That's a thing to work on. Convene people and synthesize the feedback, or keep us aware. Here's areas where we want further exploration on certain things. Can you do that for us? But I think that just saying have an economic development subcommittee, way too big.
Because then maybe one thing we have to think about for this resolution is something where like as part of our annual budget planning or whatever, the strategic planning, that every September, we provide a list so that it becomes in the staff tick
Yeah.
with the commission, but for our
That's a
work.
good idea.
Every September, we will provide the POCAC a list of, requested work sessions or other products, and then there's a feedback loop about what they plan to do and when, right? Like that, maybe we need a little bit of an annual schedule, and then much less prescription on other.
I think we could redraft this from just a clean, like less complicated, less.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sometimes our resolutions get a little overwrought with.
But do we want to punt on the joint meeting? Because, I mean, A, Commissioner Chair Savada won't be able to be there. B, we now understand that we want to redraft this resolution and that's too short of a timeline? Or is that just kicking the can down the road?
That's the right question. My input on that question is that we would always want to listen to them anyway. So, right, and get feedback of how they sit with these sort of ideas. So if we had the ability, and that's where none of us speak ourselves. So if one of you has the ability to synthesize some of these key points, and I know Mike has that ability, of like the things that you heard from us today, I know obviously it's televised as well, like move us towards the possibility of these sorts of things, an annual schedule, with requests from the commission, more flexible work products, these sorts of things, and just say, how do they sit with any of these? Not that we're all adopting any one of those ideas, but to the extent there's like 8 ideas that you all shared today, are we ready to have not a draft, but a conversation about those points?
With the POCAC.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we could do is put together sort of a bulleted list of the concepts we discussed here and share it with you all next Monday during the work session where we're going to discuss the waterfront center, just as a way of confirming we heard you correctly and captured it all. And then that could be the basis of the conversation with the POCAC all evening.
What I'm concerned about is us asking them their opinion on something we're not gonna execute on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if we are creating the structure and we're asking for their opinion on the structure and then we don't do it, we would have been better off not to ask. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
And what, I guess, what's the concern that we wouldn't then go?
if they all say, we wanna be experts, this is kind of, to some extent, the last meeting that we had, the June, like, we think that we have expertise and we would like to give our opinion on the work being done on Bud Inlet, for instance. That's what we would like to do. That I don't think is what the commission wants them to do. And so then we ask them for their guidance and feedback, and then we're like, no. And I don't think that is supporting them in their, it's not empowering them. Like, because we're asking them, like, we need to give them a task where they're empowered to do it. Do you know what I mean?
But aren't we
Like-
here asking for their input on a process we want to put in place
That's
where
what I'm-
we're going to give them the substance list of what we want them
I
to?
know, but I'm concerned that we have kind of been down this road where it's like, well, no, we want to give you our opinion on the Bud Inlet process. And we're like, well, we don't want your opinion because we have a consultant and a staff member. So that's not what, how, and then that's why we're in this tornado. I think, like, because we keep not giving clear guidance. That's what I'm afraid of, is that to me feels just disrespectful of the POCAC. To be like, because we already did that. Before, I think both of you were here, we've been having this. Like, and we're in disagreement around the role of the POCAC to some extent, right? With the POCAC.
But then we just,
And we had some staffing where it supported that, where it took the power away from the commission, like, so that became confusing. I just don't want there to be more confusion. I feel like clear is kind,
And
and
so-
we are being unclear.
so Commissioner Harding, then on the brass tacks for next week, your question is, are we ready to have a conversation that leads to more clarity, or is it just going to continue to muddy the water?
Yes, and is that worse?
And I have an instinct that we have a different skill set here and we can get clarity from a conversation next week. How do you all feel? We weren't part of the wars or, we're not veterans, but
We do need to be clear. I completely agree. Clear is kind. We need to give clear direction, but I don't think it would hurt to ask their opinion and on some of these things, as long as they know that we're going to be saying, this is the resolution, this is what you'll be doing, and regardless of, what one person may want. I think they would value being heard.
Commissioner Sanders?
I'll pass. Bob?
Yeah, I think, I think we haven't been clear in the past because we honestly did not. A couple of reasons. Like I mentioned before, I personally didn't really understand how best to utilize the POCAC. The other thing is, leading up to today, there was always a distraction. We talk about the POCAC, we get committed to understanding and dialing in projects for them. And then something would come up and distract us from that, and we never followed through. And so I think maybe having a commission appointed to the POCAC in that role would help keep us at least focused on the tasks that we have assigned to keep them going. I just think that we need to focus as a commission. I'm all in favor of hearing opinions of the POCAC and how they would like to operate. However, it's up to the commission to make that final determination and then execute. We need to focus on execution.
And to your point, if we have members who can't, jive with that, maybe they're not the right fit for the POCAC, unfortunately.
Sure.
I think there are projects that they can do. I know we've heard a couple of them today, and I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about is we have a small cities grant program that's kind of come under fire in recent years, and maybe the POCAC could take a look at that program and see how we could better serve the small communities, the South County communities. So, I mean, that's just an idea too, that things that could be done. So,
And especially that thing of like calling, or how are other ports doing the work, or
yeah.
I think often a staffer would have the best connections, but this is all it's extra work when it's sort of like learning about something that doesn't feel like a staffer's book of business, that's where they're bringing value, right? Or is it that, but then the other ports are like.
Yeah.
Um,
Also community connection. I think that would be a great project to go out into their own communities and see what projects are happening and what the small cities may need funds for.
Yeah, some kind of
Oh, yeah.
create some kind of community connection strategy that, you know, that.
Without any staff. The question is, how do we minimize it being, taking staff time unless we have a staffer who feels like, oh yeah, this is an amazing resource. I know how to unlock it. I'm a communications, community engagement person, and I can't believe I have access to this group of people, but we've not had that kind of the person with the bandwidth.
I don't want to take anything away from staff. What
I'm
I'm
not-
thinking is
Yeah,
that,
Right.
you know, and from the POCAC perspective, they can engage with the communities and you know, let us know what the community feels is missing. I mean, I don't want to get into the details on something like that, but you know, without taking away from staff, I'm sure there are projects we can put together.
It's 6:30, 6:25.
mhm.
I would say, I think I saw the org chart recently and I see that Mike both supervises the communications team and he's been our engagement sort of expert on a lot of our top priorities because of your past service, to the city of Olympia. My question would be, would you feel comfortable possibly framing up some recommendations and why they're your recommendation for the joint both? And if you can say, maybe we're not there yet, for the joint POCAC and commission.
I would want to work with Alex on that and think, I mean, I'm happy to do that. I think the first thing, to be honest with you, in this conversation that I haven't done and we haven't done, is looking at WPPA. And maybe you guys have had that, maybe this has already been a conversation. Do any of the other ports have sitting advisory committees and best practices and concepts for how to utilize them? I mean, sometimes I think that, I think we forget to go look at, has somebody been down this path and maybe they've figured out some things? So I am curious just on, you know, are there ways to make this functional? The concept of the sitting advisory committee is not one that I've typically, unless it has a very, like at the city, they'll have a very specific role. Like the planning commission, here's your roles and responsibilities and your authorities, very clearly defined. And they play a role in a process. The idea of one that just it's sitting for the whole organization. I haven't really seen, at least at the city, they don't have that. They're niche. Or what I'm most common with is using advisory committees on a project to project basis. And they almost become like disappearing task force model, where it's, hey, we're taking this specific project, building a team of, like the one that you talked about with the one community plan. There's folks that we are looking for, and once the project has been completed, we release you from the responsibility of having to continuously show up. I think that those models can help burnout. And they inherently are assigned to a task. So I think that there's a couple of ways that you could think about how you want to use them.
Because if I go back to Commissioner Harding's observation that we committed to 2 people as part of this destination waterfront, it seems to me that we definitely need broad sets of people, and not just from Olympia, who are thinking about this planning process we're going to be doing. But when we were launching it, we like set up a different, it's like, oh, these people weren't recruited for it, so we're gonna set up a different committee. And that makes me worried that like the POCAC, like integrating somehow how we use the POCAC in that one top priority where we are going to be putting a lot of investment in and it's not detracting, it seems to me really important.
So a couple questions. So I think for me personally, it feels important to really synthesize the things I heard from the commission tonight so that, and put them in writing and lay them out and get them out to all of you so you all can make sure we captured it correctly and if there's anything we missed. And then next question though is translating that into an updated resolution and maybe sort of different practices and procedures with POCAC. Do you want to have the joint meeting on the 17th to discuss these things, or do you think we need more time to flesh them out?
I don't think we're ready. That's my opinion, because I think that we have continued to be unclear with the POCAC, and that has continued to create frustration and burnout. And as I'm listening to Mike, what I'm hearing is like, maybe a sitting POCAC doesn't make sense. Maybe we have 2 citizens on the implementation team for Vision 2050, and we have a special committee that's the peninsula, blah, 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 like, and the airport, blah, 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 and maybe that makes more sense. Like, maybe you get more specific expertise, but I think this is a broader conversation, so I don't think we're ready. Because the worst thing we can do in my mind is go into that meeting and be unclear.
Do you think we're ready to hear their presentations of what they've been working on? It sounded like someone was aware of what they've.
Yeah.
they've
Yeah,
done.
there's
They've
2 different
invested.
subcommittees that have materials they would love to present to you. If not at this work session, then they wanted to do it at a regular board business meeting.
Either way, I think that that's great. And learning about what people have been dedicating their time to do is great. I think that if we are gonna open the conversation about the duties and roles, we need to be crystal clear.
When we're not ready.
And what I hear is that we are all in alignment that we don't want there to be overlap between the POCAC and the staff. Like overlap meaning duty overlap. We want there to be clear role designation. We don't want there to be overlap between the POCAC and the commission. We want there to be clear role. Because that's clear as kind but I think that we haven't all known what our lane was, right? Like, and so then the staff and consultants are like, wait, are they doing this? Or like, well, how am I using that? It's like, how do we all see the value in the different role that we're playing? We have to be clear on what that role is.
And be honest that relationships take work. So that's where we move to like, does it get cast for specific things instead of a standing advisory team?
But I think considering that, I mean, we've looked at the iterations of the resolution and it's been years and years of this legacy of like, none of us agree with what it says we're doing. Maybe we need to rethink it altogether.
That feels like a longer term
Yeah.
conversation.
And it came up when our former staff member had, I know she had
Yeah.
called around to other ports and given us a short report in a previous meeting about what other ports were doing. So that is out there. I don't remember if anything went, but I can try to find my notes for you, Mick. But well, really that's kind of what came up. That's how the subcommittees were originally formed. You know, we thought we need to have some more specific interests and then
I can make.
we also had the conversation about like redoing the whole thing, and that may be what we need to do.
Part of the urgency for this is there's members of the POCAC who are worried about not having the recruitments filled because they want to plan for their
Right.
term out. And that's what's been sort of the driver. And then I've been saying, well, what are we recruiting them for, right? So I'm excited about the possibility though, not about putting out our idea because we don't have clarity, but about hearing from them. And I will make a point of being here at next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay.
I'll make that.
Okay, so we'll keep the meeting on the calendar for all of you, give the POCAC an opportunity to share with you what they've been working on, but we'll hold off on a conversation about sort of POCAC structure, how assignments are done until the commission's had more time to chew and stew and come up with clarity.
I think, in my opinion, that sounds great. Like, because I think that is respectful of the
I agree. I think, yeah, if we're not ready or clear, there is an opportunity for it to be just kind of a spin with them. And it's
Canceling
not-
and postponing. could
Yeah,
be
also could be a
also
problem.
great thing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Okay.
making sure that they see that their work is a priority.
That sounds great. So I will work with Mike on capturing everything we talked about, sort of principles, and we'll share them out with you guys. For next Monday's work session.
And it's totally reasonable that you won't have, if it's all baked by next Monday, so whatever is
I think at least
the bullet
being
points.
able to reflect back to you,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, on what you all said is the limit of what.
If we think, and if we think next week,
There's limits.
next week's work session will.
That's
If we think next week's work session then is somewhat short, because there's sort of two presentations, do we want to add agenda planning back in to next week's work session, or do we feel like it's too soon?
So next week's work session for just the commission's 16th, we're gonna talk waterfront center. And I think we always want to have an agenda setting piece to those. Tuesdays is called a work session because you all are attending, but it's a POCAC.
Oh, it's a, okay. Okay, so we have two, right,
Yeah, so Monday, Tuesdays.
keep it nice and short.
Hey,
All right, anything else? Our agenda doesn't allow for anything but adjourning, so I guess I will adjourn and then. Commissioner Sanders?
Oh, nothing. I was just,
I was,
we were just.
it's getting late.
just getting a little giggly at the end of a work
It's
session.
getting late, okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks.
Was it getting late?
It's just- I think the end of the meeting just sort of like, oh, that was a long conversation, kind of hit.
Ah.
But